which was identified in 1995 by Yiying Zhang et al., who are now in our lab across the street. So when leptin was first described, Jeff Friedman, who was the senior author on the paper, and others alluded to the possibility that this might be a cure for obesity. After all, if you give leptin back to the obese mouse, it becomes lean. And as I showed you in this picture right here, this is the same child who was one of the roughly now 20 families who have been identified as having this inability to make leptin. Here's the child at age 3. Here's the child at age 7. The difference is that this child has been treated with leptin. Okay? So the idea was, well, gee, if I give fat people leptin, won't the pounds will melt off? This could really be the yak on syrup of the 1990s. Who knows? And a couple of people, Rudy Leibel, myself, Rexa Hema, and Streams and Chua said, it doesn't make sense. That's not the way leptin should work, because it's impossible to believe that we evolved a system that would defend body thinness. Right? There has to be some defense of body thinness, right? If we did nothing but forage all day, way back when in the Serengeti, we would never have time to reproduce. We have to do something besides forage. But in the end, we don't want something that really stops us from eating when food is plentiful. So we said that if leptin has a role in human physiology, which it clearly does, we think it's more of a threshold model, where the actual signal from leptin is designed to tell you when your energy stores are too low, not when they're too high. So basically what we thought would happen is that when you're above your threshold, which is different for each person, it doesn't really do much. You feel satiated, you're eumetabolic, you're fertile, you're euthyroid. When you're deficient in leptin, either because you have that rare mutation or because you've lost weight, right? Because leptin is directly proportional to your fat mass. You become hyperphagic, hypometabolic, infertile, and hypothyroid. The infertility is very interesting. I think it's what makes leptin an especially sexy molecule. It may seem like an oxymoron, infertility and sexy. But anyway, the idea is that you want to protect a woman in times of famine. The last thing she would want to do is conceive in times of famine, because the likelihood of her and her offspring surviving that pregnancy are poor. So your body is somehow making a decision, well, not now. This is the wrong time. We can sacrifice the child we might have had now in service of all the children we might have in the future. And I think that that's an incredibly complex system that's involved. But in fact, if you take the leptin-deficient mice and you give them leptin, they become fertile. If you take women with anorexia who are amenorrheic, or women who are amenorrheic by virtue, I shouldn't say anorexia because it hasn't been done. Women who are amenorrheic by virtue of being trained athletes who've have very low body fat mass, gymnasts, whatever, and you give them leptin, they'll return to normal gonadotropin cycling. So leptin is also a fertility hormone. And the way it works is just to shut the system down when stores are inadequate. This goes back to the work of Rose Frisch. I don't know if any of you knew her. She passed away recently. Rose did this work in the 1970s where she proposed that women needed about 17% body fat to menstruate and about 21 or 22% body fat to be fertile. It varies a lot between women, but it was incredibly insightful of her to think of things that way. Okay, so what we're really talking about here is symmetric versus asymmetric endocrine physiology. This is symmetric endocrine physiology. The more steroids you take, the more home runs you hit, right? There's no question about it. The uglier you get, the more pimples you have, the more likely you are to kill your girlfriend. But for whatever reason, you get more of a response, and it's dose dependent. With leptin, we think that the main difference between lean and obese people is at this tipping point when the leptin level gets low enough that their bodies respond to it. So in other words, it's not a matter of how high your leptin levels are, it's how low they are. And there are other molecules like this that we deal with every day, right? Glucose is the prototype of this. If I gave each of you a Snickers bar and you bumped your blood sugar up 30 points, you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't care. If someone was sneaking around and giving you each a shot of insulin and you dropped your blood sugar 30 points, you'd be looking at the guy sitting next to you like he was a turkey leg. I mean, you would want, you would be rushing out to the lobby to get something. Your body is very responsive to low blood sugar, other than the fact that you're peeing more and you're probably doing bad things to various organs in your body. It's not that responsive to high blood sugar. Okay, so we changed our protocol now, and our hypothesis was that though leptin administration was shown by Steve Heimsfield and others to have no effect, essentially, we'll talk about this later, on weight in humans at their usual weight, that if you gave it to people at a reduced weight, it would have a very potent effect, because it would be a way of fooling their brains and telling them, gee, the way you weigh more than you think you do because you've got leptin. So therefore you should pretend that you're at your usual weight. So we modified our protocol. We brought lean and obese people in at their usual weight. We did all the unpleasant things to them. We had them lose 10% of their weight. And then we did a single-blind crossover study where they were given leptin, not in the supraphysiological doses that you have to give to someone at their usual weight to induce any kind of weight loss, but at just enough of a dose to get them from here to here in terms of their leptin levels. And this is what happened. So I'm showing you the different compartments of energy expenditure. If you lose 10% of your weight,